We would now begin with the first session of the conference that would discuss the policy and regulatory framework with a focus on C&I renewable markets. Vinay would set the context for the discussion and moderate the session. You can send us any questions you have on the topic. If these questions remain unanswered during the course of the discussion, we will try to answer them towards the end of the session. In the panel for our first session on policy and regulatory framework, we have with us today Ms. Aditi Vijay, Lead of Sustainability and Agro Development, AB InBev, Mr. Neeraj Menon, Partner, Trilegal, Ms. Anne Josie, Fellow, Prayas Energy Group, Mr. Debashish Ghosh, Head Energy and Green Energy, Hindalco, Mr. Manikat Sangameshwaran, CEO, Radiance Renewables, Mr. Ashish Upadhyay, Additional Secretary and Financial Advisory, Ministry of Power, will also be joining us shortly. Over to you, Vinay.
Thanks, Ankita. Very good morning again. I'm sorry you are stuck with me again for the next session. A very warm welcome to all our co-panelists, that is Mani, Neeraj, and Debashish, and Aditi. Aditi, we can't see you, or at least I'm not able to see you. And we will also have Mr. Ashish Upadhyay, who will be joining us from Ministry of Power anytime now. So the theme for the session is policy and regulatory landscape. We discussed it very briefly in the first session also. Really, just in case you were not there, I think my point really is that there is a very strong interest from the consumers. There's also a very, very strong and thriving ecosystem on the supply side. But there's so much policy uncertainty, which manifests itself in so many different ways, which is basically not allowing the marriage between the buyer and the seller. So in a very kind of easy manner. So that is really the nub of the issue and one of the biggest market challenges in corporate renewables today. There is the Ministry of Paper draft rules are highly welcome because they do provide, I think the best word I use is some kind of guidance and anchoring to the C&I renewable policy framework, which, to be honest, so far has been in a completely no man's land. Now, the issue, as always, in the sector will be how does the central government get the states to toe the line and get the states to buy in into the new policy framework, and what is the timeline for the new policy framework. So, while we are waiting for Mr. Upadhyay, I will like to start with Aditi and Debashish, you first. I mean, you are the consumers, you are the ones who want to buy renewable power. So just tell us, I think very briefly, it will be useful to hear what are your renewable targets? What have you done so far in terms of amount of power which has been procured or megawatts that you have contracted already? And what are the kind of major challenges that you've been facing, particularly on the policy and regulatory side? So Aditi, we can start with you and then we will go over to Debashish.
Sure. Thank you so much, Vinay. So at AB InBev, actually, we have a target of achieving 100% of our purchased renewable electricity. 100% of our purchased electricity through renewables by 2025. So that's the target that we have set out for ourselves. And we do have a roadmap definitely to, achieve that target. But then, as you also put it out rightly in the context setting, that there are a lot of regulatory barriers which kind of, put a little, space or comma, I would say, in terms of having that roadmap kind of carved out for us. That's the challenge that we are facing currently. If we see in terms of AB InBev India footprint, we are somewhere near 13 to 15% of our electricity being, sourced through renewable sources. So that's what we are currently at. But then, yes, our goal is to reach 100% by 2025. So, that's what I can talk about, on our target. So,
and Aditi, what can you kind of voice any major problems that you've been facing? Do you see a clear roadmap from going from 25% to 100%? What are the kind of challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, so I think the challenges which have been also discussed time and again are more from the regulatory barriers that we are facing, and also a lot of non-uniformity in terms of policies at different states. So electricity being a state subject, I think that's where a lot of kind of concern comes out when we talk about CNI consumers, where for example, any organization like ours, I mean, if we have an India footprint where breweries are located across states in India, uh, our learnings from one state kind of do not apply to another. We have to again reinvent the wheel. So that's where major issues come. And also, like each state kind of has a different barrier. For example, like a state like Haryana, where we do have like policies are kind of in place, but then uh, at utility level there are challenges to get approval. So I think one of the uh, key takeaways that we have also understood through our various policy working groups that we have been part of is to have utilities in in the journey along to achieve 100% RE. So I think utilities are a very, very important, discoms are very, very important part of the entire ecosystem for us. And I mean, if we can't leave them, and we need to ensure that how it becomes a a very, very win-win situation, a very symbiotic situation, situation between CNI consumers as well as the discoms. So that's where I think we need to find the right marriage where we can come up with the right market structures to enable both CNI consumers to consume renewable electricity, to have that wider footprint, but at the same time not ensuring that we are kind of overstepping on the utilities business. So that's where I think we need to find the right balance.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Aditi. Devashish, Hindalco is one of the biggest corporate consumers of power. I know power is a very significant part of is a major input into metals, and there is a pressure not only to decarbonize but also to reduce the cost. How are your plans for more RE procurement progressing?
Yeah, so good morning, all of you, and thanks to Bridge to India to invite me for the in this session. So as you just mentioned, aluminium is very to the extent of energy we consume. So we have been so far mostly into standalone renewable projects. So currently we are at 50 megawatt. By end of this financial year, we will go to 100 megawatts of renewables. We are parallelly pursuing, another 100 megawatt projects which are in different phases of implementation.
I think we lost Devashish.
Sorry, I do not know whether I'm audible. Yeah.
No, I think we lost you. Yeah, we lost you there for about 15 seconds. So maybe you were saying that you will have another 50 megawatts by the end of the year.
So 100, we are working on another 100 megawatts additional capacity in various phases. Right. On ability and finalization of those projects. But we are today more interested into the long term because, these standalone projects, we cannot achieve major capacity. For major capacity, we believe that storage, we have to come in with storage because manufacturing requires continuous supply of power. So we are actively also pursuing few projects, mostly related to storage project.
I think we lost Devashish again, so we'll give him 10 seconds. While we wait for Devashish to come back, Aditi, I just wanted to ask you, what are the various technologies or routes that you have used for renewable power procurement, like rooftop solar, open access? Is it third-party PPAs or are you doing projects on your own, etc.?
Yeah. So, Vinay, I mean, it's a mix of everything. So, it is not that with one kind of model, we can go with 100%. And we are very, very clear, even like globally, if we talk about AB InBev, that we cannot go 100% just by on-site. I think that's where that's where the limitations are, because I mean, your land is a limitation, your roof space area, everything is a limitation there. So, I mean, talking about AB InBev, we see that about 15 to 20% is where we, kind of, have our capacity coming through on-site, but the rest of it, we depend on open access, we depend on other off-site, sources of renewables. So it's a mix of, we are also engaging with certain third-party solar developers to get into a power purchase agreement. We have an open access contract as well. So it again depends from state to state. We are also evaluating group captive as one of the, models of going with renewable in states like Maharashtra and in states like Haryana. So that's where we are kind of evaluating. But then, yes, there are challenges and hurdles in between, definitely.
Sure. And have you tried to buy anything on the exchange? Any green power on the exchange?
Not yet. That's something which we haven't tried yet.
Devashish, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Today, I mean, my network is horrible. I do not know both my office network and my, personal dongle also. So
no problem. We can hear you very well. Now. Please go on.
Yeah. So as I was saying, so we believe that, going forward, storage needs to be promoted in a big way, for enhancing the capacity of renewable in the country, and as well as for the any organizations. And as we also see that over the next 5 years, green hydrogen is going to come in a big way, because hydrogen has to play a major role in the decarbonization journey. And again, the requirement of transfer of large quantum of RE power will be required, where we will need the grid infrastructure to transfer this high volume of RE power. So, so in short, we need a very conducive regulatory framework to promote the new and emerging technologies in the space of storage and also in the green hydrogen space, and so that we can quickly move and take over these new technologies. And at least for the next 5 years, there has to be some promotion in terms of some waiver of the some of the ISTS and other charges, this transmission charge. Otherwise, these projects as on date are not viable economically.
Right. And so I didn't expect to start with this, but since both you and Aditi mentioned this, very interesting that you mentioned storage as one of the key likely contributors. What kind of policy changes or enabling mechanisms would you like to see to adopt more storage? What is preventing you? Is it, I presume it is not cost. You mean other mechanisms, other policy interventions which are required to make that happen?
I will just give one example. So if we see the state of Gujarat, which is a very progressive state in terms of the RE. So there is a hybrid policy today which is there, and a regulation has also come out on these renewable projects. Unfortunately, there is nothing on storage in that policy. What is holding? Because the consideration, so for a project which will have storage, there will be different considerations in terms of the capacity, etc. So there are certain restrictions which are imposed in this policy preventing implementation of projects with storage. We had, of course, there's some pandemic issues are going on. We have not been able to pursue so much. But yes, there are hurdles in terms of the current regulatory framework because the considerations for storage projects are absolutely different.
Mm-hmm. What about, one of the things I've always wondered is, we have often talked about interstate open access, and that has still not taken off. I would like to hear from Mani and Neeraj. Mani, have you looked at interstate open access? Is that, I know many people have been requesting for waiver on interstate charges for open access projects also, but that clearly is not happening. Does the interstate open access market have any legs? Is that going to take off at some point of time?
Thanks, Vinay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, man.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to be on this distinguished panel. Just coming on this question on ISTS, yes, we have looked at interstate transmission of power for renewables in a very large way. We have worked on a few bids as well for corporates that have issued RFPs on this situation. And what we find is that this is going to be a very big market. So yes, it has got a lot of legs to stand on. There are some challenges which has to be overcome from an ISTS standpoint of view. We find that the ISTS projects connected on CTU have a better chance to survive than a project that is connected on STU, because the cost differentials over almost 45 to 50 paise kills the economics for some of these customers. So that's one point. The second is that the waiver that has been provided under the regulation, it does allow for certain transmission charge waivers, etc. if you commission the project by a certain timeline, which earlier was around 2022 December, which has now been extended by 1 year because of the pandemic. Now we find that that is a very good move by the government to do that. There is a little bit of lack of clarity on this because these projects seems to be more for the government bids that happen, the DISCOM bids, but it's not very clear for C&I private customers who wants to do it on a ISTS basis whether this will apply. So, and also there is a mention about competitive bidding, which can be conducted by corporates, which they do anyway for a project of this size. So whether that is good enough to qualify under this route is something we need to have clarity on. The second aspect is that in ISTS under captive model, because even the corporates that are bidding for ISTS transactions, they would like to go for captive because there are certain benefits of doing so. Now, what is not clear is that which is the entity that will say, okay, you have to file this captive status with us. In the DISCOM case, we know that it is to be submitted to the local transmission level company. But in a ISTS transaction, it is not clear. But that is okay. That is a minor point. It is not such a big hurdle. So that is one. And the thing that will allow ISTS transaction to propagate in a big way would only be if the connectivity voltages of the customer are at a very high level. Because if they are at a very low level, then there is a lot of losses that get added to in the system eventually. So ultimately, if the customer is connected on CTU and you as a generator or developer is connected on the CTU as well, then in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense. So we think that a lot of large manufacturing companies in the metals and mining industry, especially companies in aluminum, steel, they have a huge chance of making it work. So I think there is a huge potential for this sort of the opportunity here. Also, I think that large data centers, which are now gaining up a huge amount of interest and market share, and most of the data centers are looking at green power because their customer constituency demand green power, and there is no way right now for everyone to get 100% green power. Like my colleagues here, Debashish and Aditi, have mentioned. The demand is there, the appetite is there, but even if we as generators or developers are wanting to do it, it is not possible for us all the time to meet the requirement because of various challenges. And we will talk more about it. If you have any specific question, I'm happy to answer that. Thanks.
And would you say that interstate route is economically viable if the charges were not to be waived?
Yes, it is viable. We have given bids that are extremely competitive, almost as competitive as your sort of utility bids. So they can be competitive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Neeraj, do you want to add to that? I mean, personally, I thought it's pretty clear that interstate charges will not be waived for open access projects. But other than that, are there any other policy or regulatory hurdles you see in interstate open access?
Yeah. First of all, thank you once again, Vinay, for having me over and on this panel. I think Manikan has pretty much said it all. But and just to add to and sort of confirm his point, yes, we have seen quite a few transactions on the interstate open access basis. It's not always pure open access. We've also seen captive arrangements on an interstate basis. Again, the challenge that we have faced there is on regulatory compliance. because when you sort of informally reach out to the distribution company in the jurisdiction of the generating station or the distribution company at the consumer end, they sort of have feigned ignorance on how to proceed with this sort of an arrangement. So that's a bit of a regulatory uncertainty that needs to be settled. But yes, you're right that interstate charge and loss waiver is not there currently for private consumers. But I take Manikan's point that if competitive bidding guidelines have to be followed, these guidelines can be followed by anyone, right? And to the extent that there is no requirement for a commission to really give a vote of confirmation for these transactions, the same principle should apply, that there should be. But again, you have to also sort of measure it with the resistance from the other side, which will say that there are no free lunches, right? So, or dinners. So how long will this free subsidized arrangement go on? So that is really the challenge. But if cost competitiveness is there, even with these charges, I believe these transactions can happen. I don't see any sort of regulatory or a legal impediment in showing these charges. The only other point I'd like to add is that in a lot of times what we've seen is there are consumers who like to procure power on an ISTS basis, but unfortunately at all times they are not directly connected to the ISTS. So while the generator, of course, has a choice to directly connect to the ISTS, the consumers are established plants and they may have STU connections. So that interface between STU to ISTS and then onwards, becomes an impediment where they face the same challenges, just like any other intra-state consumer would face in terms of getting that STU open access. So that is, I would say, one impediment that is holding this back.